The Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. William Panzarella is a writer, a researcher, and a constitutionalist. He's author of A Place They Called America. And we're taking a look at the State of the Union address this morning, but maybe at America in general. And William joins us here on WSBA. Mr. Panzarella, great to have you on the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary. Thank you for having me.
Well, I was an old history teacher for 25 years, and I used to enjoy teaching the Constitution, so I'm always happy to have a constitutionalist on. But I'm intrigued by the title of your book, A Place They Called America. Sounds like we're pining a little bit for the past there, are we?
Yes. I mean, and that's not to say that it cannot change and it cannot be saved, but I think you'll find if someone was in a coma for even, say the past 25 years and they woke up today, they would find the America that they know fundamentally changed.
William, let me ask you a question because I think it's intriguing to me. I'm not better yet. I got to back up because I said intriguing 3 times yesterday, so I want to take that out. It's interesting to me that when someone calls themselves a constitutionalist, a lot of people are arguing about that very thing every day right now. And we're looking at a government that we think has used the Constitution as maybe a suggestion box instead of the supreme law of our land. What does it mean to you to be a constitutionalist?
It means that the Constitution is the founding principle of our country. It is the most important document that we have. And it's, although certain parts might be up for interpretation by courts and laws, it is straightforward. Our founding fathers were very specific. And the constitutionalist means to me is basically to be American, and that's what we are founded on.
The idea that, and I even go to a simpler thing and say that it's a set of rules. And one of the things that Americans generally respect is that we are a place that is a rule of law place, that we operate by a set of rules. And yet it seems today that instead of being a limiting document, which is what the Constitution initially was supposed to be, it has become more of a, I won't say it's an enabling document, but people are trying to take as much out of it as they can instead of just staying within its limits. Do you see the same thing?
Oh, I agree, Gary, 100%. And I think that's one of the largest problems facing America today, is that the Constitution basically, especially the Bill of Rights, is being torn apart. These are our rights that are granted to us as we the people. And one by one, the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, some would even say that the 10th Amendment, Section 1 of the Constitution, which grants legislative powers to the Congress and not to the president. These are all being eradicated.
A lot of people that I talked to the other day, I said, hey, you're going to watch the State of the Union address tonight? And they said, oh, no, I'm not watching that. It's, I might watch the Comedy Channel instead of the State of the Union address. And they said it really doesn't matter anymore to me. I'm sure you're hearing a lot of that, too, as a constitutionalist. What do we say to those people out there who say, I'm not watching anymore, I don't make any difference, it really doesn't matter, and I don't care?
Well, it twofold. First of all, it does matter, and you should watch, because one of the most important rights we have as individuals is the right to vote. But with that said, I certainly understand the sentiment of most Americans that they are disgruntled when they see not just the president, but any politician get up there on their pulpit, and they know when they tune in, they're going to hear basically things that are not true, and then promises that are never going to come true.
Like tonight's, you're going to have the Republicans up there on the stage tonight in Charleston, South Carolina, who are going to be talking about what their role is, what their mood is for the country, what they're going to try to play out as far as an agenda for the country. And there's a lot of people that say, I'm not watching this stuff anymore. I'm getting tired out. The only reason they watch anymore is to see what outrageous thing Trump might say again.
It's true, and it's interesting that you brought up the Comedy Channel, which there's nothing wrong with the Comedy Channel. But I also think, and I think this is very much done on purpose. I call it the dumbing of America. Is that some people are so disgruntled that they don't want to watch, but other people tune out simply because they'd rather watch, the Real Housewives than realize what's going on in America. And I think whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, the president and every other politician, whether you like it or not, whether you vote for them or not, the policies that they make are going to affect your life.
Well, that's a big thing, and that's what we always come back down to. That's the granite level that you're going to hit. But it's interesting. We mentioned the Comedy Channel. You get shows like The Daily Show. You get a lot of the late night shows now that aren't necessarily really political, but they do make a comment on the politics of the day. And a lot of people in this soundbite society, William, seem like, well, this is where I'm going to get my news. I'm going to go grab it here in little bits and drabs in 10 seconds, and that makes me an expert on it then. When in reality, you've really got to tune in a whole lot more intense way, I think, than that.
I agree, and I completely understand that everyone is very busy these days. People are, working. We all have full schedules. People have families. But even if it's just to just breeze the news, I would say to people, never get your news source from one source. Look at different sources, because they're all going to be slanted one way or another.
And I often say to people, go to places you don't agree and listen carefully, because people want to tune that out. I said, don't go to places that are just going to kind of reinforce what you say. Go to places that are going to test what you say, and you might be amazed at, it gets you thinking. I mean, it really gets you thinking about other points of view. Now, if you're just hearing people give you talking points and read that kind of stuff off to you, that's probably boring. But, if people are explaining why they think what they think, for example, I love to listen to Bernie Sanders. I love to listen because I think the guy really believes what he's peddling, and I think that I need to listen to that kind of stuff to hear about what the other point of view is in this country that I may or may not agree with, but I want to hear someone break it down. So I have great respect for people who really believe in this stuff. And then you get someone, I have a much more difficult time respecting a Hillary Clinton, who seems to latch on to the daily thing and see where the wind's blowing as far as the polls, and then says, yeah, I agree with that too. She doesn't seem to have the internal kind of belief that a Bernie Sanders has.
Correct. And I would even expand to say people should listen to world news, because not only to see what's going on in our country, but we need to see as individuals how the rest of the world views us.
Let me come to your book, because I think it's really important here, and talk a little bit about a place called America. When you look at the State of the Union address the other night, I was reading something the other day where I guess it was the year before, it was 48 million watched. Last year it was 31 million watched. I didn't see the most recent numbers on how many watched the other night, but I suspect it probably wasn't as many as it was maybe last year. Do we really need a State of the Union address anymore? I mean, I remember when the days of reading when George Washington used to send a note up and say, hey, things are okay. There you go. Should we go back to something like that, or have we gone too deep into the weeds where we like all the fanfare and the bluster and so forth?
And I think we do need a State of the Union address. However, I would much prefer if the State of the Union address, whoever is president, would be more forthcoming, more honest about what is going on. I think we actually do need it, because I think there's so much going on, not only in our country, but the world. And with globalization, the world is smaller and smaller now.
Well, I've often thought that with politicians in general, and maybe the State of the Union address specifically, and any other great major address, you ought to invent something like a collar, like you have for the invisible fence for your dogs, right? And when you lie, you get buzzed, okay? And it would be just a gradually greater shock each time, and every lie you tell. It would, the entertainment value for watching it would certainly go up. People would watch that and love it. So, what do you think? Do I have any chance with that idea?
I think that there'd be a lot of buzzing going on.
No, I said that
they would last. I don't think they would last 3 minutes.
Tongue firmly implanted in cheek. There's no question about it. But one of the things that I heard yesterday, it really bothered me a lot. Dennis McDonough, who is the White House Chief of Staff, was asked a question about, you're effectively going to be a lame duck later on this year. What are you going to do then? What are you going to start to do getting ready for a new career? He said, wait a second. He said, we'll do audacious executive action over the course of the rest of the year. We'll do audacious executive action. What does that mean? Audacious. We've already seen, I think, what audacious is when you take legislating into your own hands and you try to circumvent Congress. We've seen that on a number of these deals that have been made on climate change, on the deal with Iran, where we've circumvented Congress and we've managed to get around that. So it's kind of scary when you hear a person representing the president say, we're going to do audacious executive action. where did executive action ever fit in so well in the Constitution?
I've never seen it like. I mean, obviously, every president has, made executive orders before, but it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The Constitution is clear. The president does not have the authority to make law. It rests within the Congress, and no matter what side of the aisle you're on, even if you agree with some of the policies, the executive actions that the president wants to make, it sets a bad and very dangerous precedent, because you might agree with him, but then, do you want the next president who you don't agree with doing the same thing? I mean, this goes against the Constitution and against our founding principles.
We're talking with William Panzarella, author of A Place They Called America. As you watched the State of the Union address the other night, I tried to sit down and watch it from the standpoint of, okay, here are the things that I know, here are the things that I've read. Now, and here are the things that the president has done. Do the words that he is saying, because it's kind of a legacy speech the other night, looking back on his 8 years, do the things that the president is saying match the things that he has done? And I found in a lot of cases they did not. I want to ask you, did you find places where you thought, the president's got a really good point here as you listened to the State of the Union and watched it the other night?
Well, it was interesting, and that you brought up the facts. Factcheck.org did a big article on it. That it's they always play with the numbers. For instance, he had said that he was boasting that nearly 900,000 manufacturing jobs he created in the past 6 years. But actually, over the term in his office, manufacturing jobs have gone down by $230,000. So it's, how they play on numbers. The one thing I was surprised about was that he actually admitted that during his administration, the divisiveness in Washington has actually become worse.
Right. And, he even, I don't know if you could really say he was humble at that point, because humble and Barack Obama don't normally go together in the same sentence. But, what he said, an FDR and Abraham Lincoln might have done better than I did in pulling things together. Again, it came back to the idea, too, of the spirit in which people are approaching each other, though. He said, why do we have to distrust somebody or think that someone is less patriotic when we approach them? And I think the president does that himself on a regular basis. At least that's my impression, my perception as a citizen watching him, because he seems like a guy who compromises when you eventually come over to my side. It's not, giving in to get the very best policy for the country. Your thoughts?
I agree 100%. And look, with the IRS scandal, that, and this, again, should scare every American citizen, that the IRS went after, Republican and conservative groups and individuals because they, might have put certain words in their forms. And there's this narrative by this administration and their minions that if you are a constitutionalist, if you if you are patriotic, you are somehow extreme. I would say the opposite is true. I would say if, a government that spies on its people, a government that doesn't allow you to have free speech, that is extreme.
It's interesting. One of the things that he talked about the other night in the State of the Union was he said there's no way he basically talked about Obamacare, and he added that that led to nearly 18 million more people gaining health insurance and has helped to slow health care cost inflation. And he added that the law didn't destroy the job market despite pessimistic predictions from critics. He said our businesses have, and it comes back to what you were making, our businesses have created jobs every single month since it became law. It's kind of an interesting segue that he makes into that from Obamacare. And I keep on hearing this number. It was 17 million last week. Now it's 18 million this week.
Right.
But they keep on saying, for example, that 18 million people are now covered. What about the rest of the population? What has the inconvenience been to the rest of the population? What has the cost been to the rest of the population? There's an awful lot. It's maybe not so untrue what he's saying there, except when you break the numbers down then, too, and you say, what about everybody else? We have, 300 and some million people in this country. What about everybody else? What has been the effect on society? Has it created more part-time jobs than full-time jobs? Those are questions I was left wanting on the other night.
It's true. I know my health insurance has gone up But it's true when they talk about first unemployment, that doesn't take into account all of the people that have just simply, A, left the workforce, or B, like you're saying, might be employed but are taking part-time jobs, or even full-time jobs, but jobs that, several years ago they had better-paying jobs and more skilled jobs. Now they're forced to pay their bills. They're taking, less-paying jobs.
It was interesting the other night, too, in the Affordable Care Act. He said something. He said, quote, that's what the Affordable Care Act is all about. It's about filling the gaps in employer-based care so that when we lose a job or go back to school or start that new business, we'll still have coverage, unquote. And I was reading this one fact check, and it said it's kind of a cool joke in a way that because Obamacare canceled insurance coverage for millions of Americans who did not change jobs. It also raised deductibles and premiums so high that many insurance companies, we read the story about United the other month, are leaving the Obamacare exchanges fully.
It's true, and you hear that all the time. And he could say any numbers he wants, but if you talk to people, on a daily basis, everyone I talk to is their premiums have gone up, their coverage is worse, and it's worse under Obamacare.
Take me through your book for a moment, A Place They Called America. When people read this book, what are they going to walk away talking about, William?
Well, it's about several things. I originally was going to write a novel about the America in the not-so-distant future, where the Constitution has been torn apart, where the government spies on its citizens, where the younger generation has been indoctrinated. But then I realized that the future is now. And so instead of writing a fiction book, I wrote a nonfiction book about what is actually happening in this world, and specifically in America. And I think there are those, the term oligarchy is usually referred to in Russia terms.
Right.
Those elitists that want to control the populace. But I really believe that there is a global oligarchy in which some Americans consist of. And by no way am I saying that every billionaire has nefarious actions.
Sure.
I think many billionaires have been great philanthropists, such as Bill Gates. And I'm not saying that everyone in government has nefarious actions. But there are those that see themselves basically as demigods and want to control basically the world. And let's face the fact, in order to control the world, you must control America, because America is the most powerful country in the world. So
I'm going to take a quick break with you here because I have to go to one, but I want to come back. I want to go more into that and talk about where you're seeing that kind of evidence, and then also some of the other things that people could take away if they read this book called A Place They Called America. We're going to be right back with the author, William Panzarella. He's here on the Gary Sutton Show, and it's News Radio 910 WSBA, back right after this. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show with William Panzarella, who is the author of A Place They Called America. There's a lot of people right now that have a really uneasy feeling about our country, William, and your book seems to come right in the nick of time. And I was, as you were describing what the novel was you're going to write, I said, well, heck, that's here now. And then you came right back and said, yeah, I just realized that this is all happening now, and it's not fiction, it's nonfiction. A lot of people out there, I'm sure, who come to you and talk to you say, I feel really uneasy about the place right now, about America and where it's going. The Pandora's box, it seems, has been open for a lot of things to get out and bastardize a lot of the things that we thought made America great. Can we put it back in? Can we get back to the constitutional America? Or is my version of Constitution not the same as your version of Constitution, and we've lost the idea that we are one America, rather many?
I believe we can get back, and I believe we have to start now.
Where do we start?
Where do we start? Well, first, I think that the two-party system is broken beyond repair.
I agree with you.
I think we need a third party, and not an offshoot of a party such as the Tea Party. And I'm not saying anything negative about the Tea Party. I'm just using them as an example, because they're the most well-known. And people will say, well, third party, it's going to take too long. I actually think that this is a perfect time for a third party because I think so many brave young men and women have recently returned from the proving grounds of Afghanistan and Iraq, and I think they should really spearhead this third party. And it starts, of course, you can't go straight to the presidency. You have to start at the local levels, and then into Congress, and then the presidency. But the longer you wait to start, the longer you stop the process.
There's a lot of people that think that we've been relegated to the cheap seats, to the spectator seats, where it doesn't really matter if they vote, because there is this sense that when people get there, they are going to become subservient to their caucus, to other interests, the crony capitalists, as opposed to the very people that put them in there to represent them in a republic, a representative democracy. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, that's got to be a big part of what you were thinking when you wrote the book, too.
It is, and I think it's by design. I think that's what many of the powers that be, the policymakers, want the people. They want the citizens to just throw up their hands and say, well, I can't do anything anyway, so my voice doesn't matter anyway, so why even try?
Do you believe, much has been said this year about the ruling class, both Republicans and Democrats. Do you see the ruling class out there? And here's the problem I think a lot of people have, kind of following up my last question. They'll say, I want to change things. I want to make things better, but I don't know the rules of the game. I don't know the rules they've set up. They've set up a different game than the one that I knew, which was supposed to be about America and about us and about doing the very best for all people in this country. What do you say to people when they come back at you with something like that?
I say, and again, it goes back to third party, and that we have to vote. And I understand why people are disgruntled, but I also understand where they're coming from. For instance, my book talks about lobbyists. 99.9% of Americans can't name a single lobbyist. We don't vote for them. We cannot remove them. However, they yield perhaps the most power in Washington. So it is a true something that's going on. It's not some conspiracy or something that we just feel. It is real.
Well, and it's also interesting that many of the lobbyists that are hired are people who are former congressmen and senators. It kind of reminds me of going out and getting a former IRS guy to do your taxes. They know all the loopholes. They know all the areas you get through. They know how to get legislation through. And so those are the ones that really, I think, have turned this into a very crony capitalist type society in many cases.
I completely agree, Gary. And I think actually many of our politicians in office are actually mere Manchurian candidates for those, that yield the real power.
Great point, William. Hey, William, where can people pick up your book? Because it looks like a great read, A Place They Called America. Where can they go find it?
Well, they can go to Amazon.com, or they can go to my website at William Panzarella, PANZARELLA.com. It's available hard copy and also on Kindle.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be reading it, and I hope everybody out there will grab a copy of the book. But, William, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. I wish you the best of luck with the book, and I hope we can talk again more about the Constitution in the future, because, we can't talk enough about it right now. It is still, I think last I checked, still the supreme law of our land. I hope we can keep it that way.
I agree with you, Gary, and thank you so much for having me on, and God bless America.
God bless America. Thanks so much, William. Take care.